G'day, I'm Karen. Thanks for watching Life in the Bush. If you have been following my video series where I've been retracing the steps of my ancestor William Hovell on the bicentenary of the Hume and Hovell expedition, then you'll know that they made it to Bass Strait, which was their aim for the journey, and that they've begun their way home. In my last video, they had reached the Arndell River, and we're up to about the 20th of December in Hovell's journal. Now, their outward journey took them 2 months, but their return journey home only took around a month, and that was because they were now familiar with the landscape. So they travelled a little further inland, more westward, to avoid some of those mountains that had caused them so much delay and trouble along the outward journey. So in this video and the next, we will be exploring their return journey home. And there are a number of monuments along the way that we'll be visiting as well. So to continue on from my last video, on the 20th of December 1824, they left the banks of the Arndell River, and they carried with them as much meat as they could from the bullock that they had slaughtered. They no longer had any salt left, so they weren't able to preserve the meat, and they knew that it wouldn't last too long. Hovell continued to describe the landscape and the soil and the vegetation in his journal. They passed back through the woodlands area, which we saw already in this video. And at the end of the day, Hovell made this entry in his journal. We lost another kangaroo dog today. I suppose he has gone back to where the bullock was killed. I do not know what the native dogs can find to live upon on the plains, but we have seen several both in going and returning. So they were down on food, and they were down on dogs that were able to help them with hunting food as well. So they're beginning to be in dire straits, really. Now, the 21st of December was the final day that Hovell wrote in his journal, simply because he ran out of room. But he expressed great gratitude at achieving their goal and a fondness for the landscape that they had witnessed while travelling through what is now Victoria. And the remainder of the return journey is summarised in William Bland's Journey of Discovery to Port Phillip. So that will be our source from here on in. And on the 22nd of December, they made it back to Sunday Creek. And on the 23rd, they made it back to the Goulburn River. And they stayed there for the 24th and the 25th of December as well. Now, on the 25th, it doesn't mention anything about it being Christmas Day. The only mention I have found about Christmas Day was in Hovell's handwriting in his copy of William Bland's Journey of Discovery to Port Phillip. And he wrote that they finished the last of the bullock meat on that day, it being Christmas Day. But they enjoyed refreshing the cattle and plenty of fish for those couple of days that they stayed by the Goulburn. And on the 25th, Hume's mare was bitten on the nose by a snake, and she swelled up so much in her face that her eyes could barely open. So the men did what they could to treat her as best that they knew how. That included keeping her walking gently through the night, and gradually she recovered from that. So they continued on from the Goulburn on the 26th of December. And it was on the 26th that it was mentioned that their last remaining dog was now too disabled to assist them in catching kangaroos. So there wasn't a lot to report on between the 26th and the 30th in William Bland's book, but there are a number of monuments through Victoria that do commemorate that portion of the journey. At Seymour, Avenel, Euroa, Violet Town, Swanpool, Molliella and Moyhu. So I'll take you there with me now. So a number of these monuments are on Tungurung land. At Seymour, the monument is in amongst roadside vegetation and just near the corner of Hume and Hovell Road. And there it is. Hume and Hovell passed this spot, 26th of December, 1824. This is a nice little patch of remnant bush here. I know it looks overcast, but it's actually quite muggy and hot today. The Avenel monument is just near Hughes Creek walk trail, so that made for a nice spot to have some lunch and a little walk around. Not as much information written on this monument at Avenel. Looks like it's to commemorate Hume and Hovell and early pioneers. After Avenel was the Euroa Monument, and that's near Seven Creeks. I'm in the town of Euroa, and Hume and Hovell passed through here 200 years ago. They were avoiding the Strathbogie Ranges on their return trip back home. And here's the monument. Actually, I liked Euroa, nice little place, and I'd like to go back there to explore it. In fact, that's actually the way I feel about so many of the towns that I got to see in rural Victoria and New South Wales on this journey, and so many of them I'd like to spend more time at. But Euroa, what I particularly liked about this, being a Collingwood fan, is opposite the monument on the other side of the road is the beautiful parkland with a massive statue of a magpie. And in my opinion, the best thing to come out of Euroa 200 years after the expedition is Jamie Elliott, who is my favourite player, a forward for the Collingwood Magpies. So I can only assume that the magpie sculpture is a tribute to Jamie Elliott. Honestly, I have no idea. That's just what I like to think, but it's actually a beautiful sculpture. If you get to go to Euroa, do check it out. Anyway, I digress. Back to the monuments. So the next one is at Violet Town, and I can't explain to you why the Euroa monument says the 29th of December, and then the next monument after that at Violet Town says the 28th. But I think it's probably a good demonstration of how challenging it's been for historians over the years to try and figure out just exactly where the expedition party was at different times. So there may never be a resolution that everybody's happy with, and there might be different opinions for years to come, but I'm going to leave that with the historians. And speaking of historians, I met a couple of lovely historians in Violet Town who took me to show me the monument and show me around. This is Norm and Brian at the monument in Violet Town with me. There's a lovely museum / art gallery / cafe / small store to visit at Violet Town, which is worth popping in to see. And I learned from Brian that Violet Town's named after the native violet, which is one of my favourite native Australian ground covers. I also learned from Brian that when Hovell referred to honeysuckle in his journal, which he did several times throughout the journey, he was referring to Banksias. And I probably should have figured that out myself, because I've already done a video about Banksia integrifolia, and one of its common names is honeysuckle Banksia. So that was a little mystery solved for me, which I appreciated. And now after Violet Town, there was still 3 monuments to go, which I visited quickly. Next was Swan Pool. Now remember, it was hot when I was visiting these monuments, so I had to prioritise. Behind me is the Swan Pool monument. I'll get there in a minute. As another quick side note, if you're interested in Ned Kelly history, these monuments are in Ned Kelly country. And at Swan Pool there's this mural telling the story of Ned Kelly. I was also told when I was in Tatong that there were letterboxes around the area that people would leave notes for Ned Kelly, and he would come to those letterboxes to read those notes. Anyway, and Beveridge is Ned Kelly's old house. So lots of Ned Kelly history if you want to do a Ned Kelly / Hume and Hovell adventure at some stage. Now this is the Mullyalla monument, and yet another monument that out-survived a school. And here's the Moyu monument. This is the one that we visited on the outward journey, and they returned through this area on the 30th of December. They still had about 2.5 weeks left on their journey, and we'll explore that in the next video. Thanks for watching. Of their journey, oops, got to look out for spider webs. Sorry, spider. Look at this. Oh, beautiful orb weaver.